Hello, welcome to Bookish avec. So this is where I'll be talking about the books that I have finished in the past week, and I'll also be talking about books that I am currently reading. Sometimes I would mention books that I DNF or books that I just bought if I feel inclined to talk about them. Anyway, so before I talk about the books, as you can see, I just had my bath and my hair is still wet, and you'll probably notice that I have water from my hair dripping on my shirt, just in case you noticed that. But anyway, I think I feel somewhat fresh now, just after shower, so I hope that the recording of this video will go smoothly. Usually it does not go smoothly because I feel uncomfortable or for whatever reason. Sometimes it's because the room is warm, but now I'm recording in the evening. I have the air conditioner on. I tried recording this afternoon, but it was way too warm and I was really uncomfortable. I was sweaty and it simply couldn't happen. So yeah, hopefully this recording would go well. Anyway, let's talk about the books that I have finished first. So in the past week, I finished 3 books, and one of those books was something that I really love, and then one of those books was something that I gave 1 star to, 1 out of 5 stars. So let's talk about them. The first one that I finished was 10 minutes 38 seconds by Elif Shafak. 10 minutes 38 seconds in this strange world. So yeah, this is her latest novel. This book was published in 2019, and 10 minutes 38 seconds in this strange world is about this woman named Layla. She lives in Istanbul, but at the beginning of this novel, Layla starts as a dead person, as a corpse. Essentially, what we see in the first part of this novel has 3 parts. In the first part, Layla is the corpse. After her body pretty much shuts down physically, her heart stops beating, her mind still retains some kind of consciousness for 10 minutes and 38 seconds. So basically in that time, in that duration, her mind just pretty much reminisces on the different episodes that happened in Layla's past that kind of changed her and turned her the way she is as a person right now. So in that respect, the first part is somewhat a bit like a coming of age story, but it's kind of happening in this flashback way. And at the same time, in the first part, we also learn about Layla's 5 best friends, who will be very, very important in the second part of this novel. And the second part in this novel is basically about how Layla's friends are kind of trying to give Layla the more honorable funeral, because essentially what this book is about, it is very political. This book, the main thing is about marginalization. It is pretty much about marginalized people and those who are disenfranchised in the society. Layla herself, she is a sex worker, and her best friends, her 5 best friends, are also people that are kind of considered as social outcasts. So one of Layla's friends is a trans woman, and then you also have immigrants in her friends, among her 5 friends. And these 5 friends, they are all quite different in terms of their personality and what they believe in, but they are all held together by their friendship with Layla. So what happens in the second chapter is that Layla, because she is a murdered prostitute, basically her body is not claimed by her family. So instead, her body is going to be buried in a graveyard called the Cemetery of the Companionless, located somewhere at the outskirts of Istanbul. And it is not exactly the most respectful way her body is treated. And her friends are not happy about that, so they hatch a plan in order to give Layla a more respectful funeral. And the third chapter is just pretty much a very the third part is pretty much a very short part. It consists of just a chapter, which is kind of a conclusion to the whole story. I'm not going to talk more about what happens in there. It's kind of beautiful. But yeah, that's the whole gist of this novel. So, if you get into this book, many people would say that the first and the second part have this really big difference on tone. Basically, there's a tone shift when you move from the first part to the second part. The first part starts out as rather gloomy, and it's kind of sad and also quite nostalgic, but overall there's this kind of subdued and melancholic feel to it. And then you move on to the second part, and the tone just pretty much shifts into something that is a little bit sunnier and brighter and happier. Although there are still kind of really dark things happening in the second part, but there are also scenes that are pretty comedic, which I think is kind of unique to this novel when you talk about Elif Shafak's book, because her other novels, I don't think they have scenes that feel as comedic as the ones that I read about in here. So, some people will find it jarring, but I personally think that transition of tone it kind of works, and I liked it. I feel like there's some sort of crescendo when it comes to the positivity level in this book, which kind of makes it lovely. I really like the way that that tone changes. There's the whole how this book moves forward in terms of its plot. So I highly recommend this one if you're interested in reading a book by Elif Shafak. This is probably one of the books that you could try if you have not read any of her stuff before. I also think that you could try with The Bastard of Istanbul, but I certainly think that this is pretty accessible as well. So the second book that I finished was Yasunari Kawabata's 1,000 Cranes. So this one was originally written in Japanese, and it was translated into English by Edward G. Seidensticker. So this book is about this young guy named Kikuji. So Kikuji lives in post-World War II Japan. And one day he is invited to a tea ceremony by one of his dead father's mistresses named Chikako. So Chikako is a middle-aged woman. And turns out when he reaches that tea ceremony, the reason why Chikako organizes it is because she wants to arrange a marriage for Kikuji to a girl that she favors. And at the same time, in that tea ceremony, another one of Kikuji's father's mistresses also invites herself in together with her daughter. And it kind of makes things a little bit tense in that tea ceremony. Basically, both of these mistresses, they kind of have their own agenda when it comes to Kikuji. So I'm not going to talk about what that agenda is, but it does feel a little bit messed up, a little bit dramatic, actually very dramatic. But anyway, what happens after that is, because Kikuji is somewhat of a indecisive young person, which kind of makes sense. He's only like, 20-something years old? And he doesn't really know what he wants to do. He doesn't really know if he wants to get married to the girl or if he wants to stay single. But essentially, these two mistresses, they kind of have their own agenda, their own personal plan as to how they want to, things that they want to achieve through Kikuji. Now, what's really interesting about this book also is that tea ceremony is actually one of the very important motifs in this book. And I personally don't really understand a lot about tea ceremonies. And despite that, I think that I kind of get the symbolism of tea ceremony in this book. And basically, this book deals a lot with the ideas of inheritance, it deals with the idea of legacy, it deals with the idea of new versus old, basically transitioning from a state, an older state to a newer state. Especially for the character Kikuji, because in this book he pretty much just kind of struggles with the idea of, he's in the age where men could get married, and he kind of struggles with the idea that maybe he should get married or maybe he should not get married, and at the same time he also sleeps around. So that is probably a little bit spoilery, but I'm not going to share with you with whom he does that. But anyway, he is this kind of like really conflicted guy, and this story, it kind of ends in this somewhat tragic manner. This book is kind of fascinating in the sense that it has all of that symbolism through the use of tea ceremonies, and I think that's really, really interesting. So the last book that I finished this past week is Ponti by Sharlene Teo. So Sharlene Teo is a Singaporean writer, and this book takes place in Singapore. So Ponti is a story about 3 different women. So we have one woman named Sue. We see the story of Sue mainly in her teenage years in this book, but we also see the adult Sue. And Sue is the daughter of a woman named Amisa. So Amisa used to be a B-list actress in the 70s, and she basically acts as this character of Pontianak, which is a ghost, kind of like a female ghost who is somewhat vengeful. And so she acts in the trilogy, and after she acted in that trilogy, her career just kind of faded away, and she somehow becomes a bit of a bitter person as she gets older. And as a result, she has this kind of difficult relationship with her daughter, Sue. And the third character that we have in this book is named Cersei. So Cersei is actually a girl from a richer family who ends up becoming Sue's friend when they meet with each other in their secondary school. And we also see the character of Cersei in her adult years. Basically, she is working at a promotion and advertising agency, where she receives the assignment that she has to do a promotion for a revival of the Ponti trilogy that will be done in the year 2020. And after she receives this assignment, all of the memories about Sue and Amisa just comes back to her. In general, this book is kind of about these relationships between these different women, and safe to say that their relationships are not exactly the sweetest relationship. It's kind of difficult and tense and somewhat complicated. Now, when I shared this book with you guys before, I thought that this book was very cliched. Like, the writing was kind of bad. It has many cliches, and it has plenty of metaphors and comparisons and similes. Some of them just sounds really awkward, like comparing a person with whom you're not really comfortable with, like being near sarin gas, or comparing seeing 2 cockroaches on the floor, dead cockroaches, as as tragic as Romeo and Juliet, which is kind of weird. So I had big issues with that, because those kinds of metaphors and similes just pretty much found throughout this entire novel. It's like non-stop. I also mentioned that I was kind of hate reading this book, but I still had that, small amount of hope that maybe something towards the end of this book will change my mind, but that didn't happen. Another reason that I don't like this book is that I just find it troubling that all of the voices of the three main characters that I just mentioned, their voices all sound the same. And they all sound angsty. I mean, it makes sense given their circumstances that they would be somewhat bitter, in their life. But still, they are just so angsty. It's like reading something, written by a teenager, or something thought out by a teenager, which in a way it kind of makes sense because two of the characters are teenagers, but at least two of the characters, Amisa and Cersei, we also see them as adults, but they still kind of sound like teenagers. So also another point I want to make about this book is that we have these three women characters. Now, I'm not saying that just because you have female characters, like the characters have to support one another. But what is really jarring to me in this book is that the female characters in here are generally quite hostile towards one another. They tend to think of other women in this like really derisive tone. It's like, and condescending also. It makes me kind of uncomfortable, to be honest, because the relationships in here, especially the relationships between these three main characters, they feel kind of toxic. And I feel like I was lied to, because the blurb at the back says that there is this intense friendship between Cersei and Sue, and I felt that there was nothing intense about that. I mean, the toxicity was intense, but the friendship was not intense. The word Ponti actually comes from Pontianak, which was the role that Amisa plays when she was an actress in the 70s. Now, that is actually kind of like a female ghost, which in modern times is increasingly gaining some traction in becoming this modern feminist figure. So I think that would probably explain why I feel that the way these characters are acting towards one another, it's kind of strange, because I came into this book expecting that this book would be kind of feminist in a way. It would showcase how these women characters would at least have some support towards one another, have some tenderness towards one another. But really, all I see is that, these main characters are just treating each other like shit. And they also treat the side female characters like garbage. It's like weird. It's really weird. So that's it for all of the books that I finished this past week. So now I'm just gonna mention quickly some of the books that I'm currently reading right now. The first one that I'm reading is The Man with the Compound Eyes by Ming-Yi. So this one was originally written in Chinese, translated into English by Darryl Sterk. I am also reading this book by Marquis de Sade. This is Justine. And I'm not sure who the translator for this one is. It was not credited in this book. I am also reading this one, and I think I'm kind of liking this one right now. This is Bel Canto by Patchett. This book is kind of about a hostage situation in an unnamed South American country, but something that kind of struck me was that this South American country has a president who is of Japanese descent, and it instantly reminds me of, how many South American presidents out there that is of, Japanese descent. I am also reading this one. This is Jim Crace's Quarantine, supposedly for maybe Midrash, but I'm still reading this one. It's already July. Now, I intended to read this one for Karibaton, but obviously May and June is already done. This one is Redemption in Indigo by Karen Lord. And one book that I kind of carried over from June for my Pride reads, this is Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. So that's it for all of the books that I am currently reading right now. Oh, well, actually, those are not all of the books I'm currently reading. I am also reading books for the BookTube Prize. So I'm reading the ones for the semifinals. And I'm reading Group B. So I actually finished 2 of the books since I mentioned to you which group I am. I mean, I don't have to be like so secretive about it anymore, like in the octofinals. I already finished 2 books, and I finished Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, and also The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. So now I still have 4 books left. I'm gonna read these 4 books in this month, and then after that, to the ballot. So that's it for this video, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful reading week. Yeah, that's it. I guess I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching, and bye.